Hello, Sitaram. Good morning, and welcome to another program in the series Addiction and Recovery. I'm your host, as usual, Ram Naresh Dwarika. And this morning, we are going to be speaking about a very important subject. So I want you all to set aside a little time. And if you may, this program is also being recorded and will be posted on Facebook and YouTube soon after the end of the program this morning. And those of you who have questions during the program, you can text me at 7685925. And if it is possible, I'll respond to them on the program itself. So I also want to remind you this program is going to be repeated on radio and TV Jagriti at 10 p.m. tonight. So those of you who do not have the time now, you can tune in then and listen to the program in its entirety. I also want to suggest to those of you who may have a problem with alcoholism or drug addiction or know someone who has a problem, you can send a link from YouTube or Facebook of the program to those people so that they also can benefit from the program. This morning, I want to speak to women-specific challenges in addiction and recovery. Now, I want you to imagine a mother, juggling two jobs and three children and secretly battling addiction she can't talk about. Now, some people might question, as I did, two jobs, most people don't have, but the working mother really has two jobs. She has the job that she goes to work, and then when she comes back, she still has the job of the traditional wife. And to take care of children. And I'll tell you, it's much more than a full-time job. And in addition, when you are battling with addiction that you can't talk about or you have to hide from siblings, from relatives, from even your spouse, it makes it even more difficult. Or wonder a young woman, for instance, who started drinking in order to cope with early childhood trauma. And now she feels too ashamed to ask for help because in Trinidad and Tobago, if a man gets drunk and he's lying down by the shop or misbehaving, people just smile and shrug it off, and tomorrow he'll be sober. As I said that, I remember saying by Winston Churchill, it is reported that he came home after lunch one day drunk, and his secretary said to him, "But Mr. Churchill, you're drunk." Said, "Yes, and you are ugly. Tomorrow I'll be sober." And that's how casual people treat it when it comes to a man drinking or having a problem with alcohol. But when women are drinking, I remember a colleague of mine, Dr. Sandra Reed, doing a survey among these are third year medical students. She sent around a questionnaire and asked them to, describe a woman alcoholic addict person, a woman who was, what is the impression that the general society has? And you should see the feedback. Things like sketel and prostitute, and those were the kind of profiles that were coming up in most people's mind, that a woman who is using drugs is given to these. And there is some truth in it, in that women generally are not able to metabolize alcohol and drugs as rapidly as men. And I know some people will argue with me on that, because there are some women who could drink the average man under the table. But generally, women are not able to handle it. They get drunk faster, they get affected by it more, and they are more likely to be abused and taken advantage of. Not too long ago, I had this young person in my office, woman, who is given to going out and drinking, and she very casually told me, "Look, when I get drunk, boys abuse me, sexually abuse me." And it sounds so casual that she was saying it like easy as that. So the issues, for women is much more different. For too long, women's struggles with addiction have been hidden in silence. And when it comes to recovery, women face unique challenges that men often don't. And I can tell you that from having worked in the field of substance abuse, in rehabilitation. I used to be director at the Piparo Empowerment Center as well. So I have first-hand knowledge of this. Now, today, what we want to do on this program, time permitting, is I want to explore why women turn to substances. That's the first question. And the unique obstacles women face in seeking and staying in recovery. Finally, how families and communities can create safer, stronger paths to healing for women. Now, addiction affects everyone. That goes without saying. However, but it doesn't affect everyone in the same way. And I started to allude to that earlier on. For many women, substance use often begins as a way to cope with trauma or abuse. And we know of all the instances of domestic violence from spouses who are drinking, or not even drinking, but because of the patriarchal nature in the society. And I'm not blaming all men, but there are men who feel that they have to be, they have to scare their spouses into submission by using threats and violence and all of that. And then a lot of women start using it to help them to cope with anxiety and depression and other mental health struggles. So while the man is drinking, the wife begins to suffer with anxiety and depression. And usually, in a lot of instances, in my experience, a lot of women turn to prescription pills, sedatives, sleeping pills, and all of that to help them to cope. Anti-anxiolytics. And if they go to the doctor, they are prescribed those things to help them with their anxiety and depression. But this is just the beginning because I'll tell you something, it is easier to come off alcohol and the illicit drugs than to be able to come off the prescription pills when you become addicted and dependent on them. And the doctor tells you, you'll have to use this for the rest of your life. And then a lot of women turn to drugs as well in order to cope with overwhelming responsibilities, children, finances, caregiving. Because I can tell you from doing marital counseling and so on, that and having worked I used to be director of family services for a while, that caring for a lot of mothers, a lot of girls, I would say, become mothers without any preparation at all. They just find themselves in a relationship and they shack up or they get married, but they're never prepared for the responsibility of taking care of children. And I have personal knowledge of this, looking at people around me. And then they become overwhelmed because children can be very demanding, screaming or two screaming children. And children, they are very energetic. It is very difficult to cope with them. So women often internalize stress, and substances can feel like relief, even if temporary. Now, a key point here is that society tends to shame addicted women more harshly than men, making them less likely to seek help early. There are biological, social, and cultural reasons women face unique struggles in both addiction and recovery. And I can tell you, having worked at the Substance Abuse Prevention and Treatment Center at Cora, now, a lot of men who are addicted to alcohol and other drugs, they will struggle with denial, refusing to admit they have a problem. But eventually, when they are ready, the family and the wife and everybody is very supportive and encouraging, and they will accompany him to the treatment facility, you know, beg the staff there to have him admitted so they could get a little reprieve from his behavior and all of that. On the other hand, it is not the same for women. Women in a family are afraid to even let their own siblings their mother or their father know that they have now become closet drinkers, or they're hiding and taking pills and they have become dependent in it. Because when you're taking these pills, yes, while you're under the influence of the pill, you feel okay. But when it is wearing away, you go into withdrawal, and that can be characterized by depression and anxiety and so on. And this is when women turn to other things as well. Next thing is they start helping themselves from the bar. Now, women can develop dependence faster due to body composition and metabolism. So that, as I mentioned that before, women's body are generally smaller most of the time, and they are not able to metabolize alcohol as quick as a man. And as a result, they get drunk quicker. And then they have to hustle to get back sober before their husband comes. And they go into all, I wouldn't speak about those things because some people might get ideas how they could hide their alcohol drinking and so on. But it is really like why playing a Russian roulette game between getting drunk during the day and getting sober before the children come on, and managing to do all the other responsibilities. And but with time, it is going to take its toll, and people are around you are going to find out what is happening. Now, society often labels addicted women as weak or immoral, and they have higher rates of childhood abuse, domestic violence, and sexual assault. Women, well, I mean, it's very unlikely a man get drunk and he's sexually assaulted, although that is not impossible. And again, women have additional challenges in that they are usually not the decision makers in the house most of the time when they are the alcoholic, and so they don't have access to their own finances so that they can go to a private treatment facility and pay for care and all of that. So they are less likely to have access to funds for quality treatment programs. And again, this is a big problem in this country because the Substance Abuse Prevention and Treatment Center at Cora used to have, I think, 6 beds. I don't know if they admit women there anymore. I'm not too sure. And generally, it is preferable to have women be treated separately. I want to say there's a ray of hope in Trinidad now. The New Life Ministry has started a treatment facility for women in Santa Flora. And there is also the Serenity Place in Cochrane Village, Point 14, that has had a treatment facility for women for quite the longest while. The administrator there, Miss Beverly Morrison, I'm sure she wouldn't mind me mentioning her. She has been doing year-one service, and she's the administrator of that women treatment facility. Now, since women do everything to cover up and hide their addiction, it is important for family members, friends, employers, and people around in the community to be able to notice, to recognize when a woman is struggling with addiction. And here's what family and friends often notice. These are some of the signs. There's an increased secrecy or isolation where she really don't want to go to parties and fests because she becomes aware that once she takes that first drink, and that's the hallmark of alcoholism. Once you take the first drink, you are unable to stop yourself. And after the last few times she went out and got hopelessly drunk, misbehaved, got abused, insulted, and all of that, she don't want to repeat that. She prefers to stay home and drink in secret. And so, we used to have a little mini mart in front. We still have a food place, and in those days we sold all kind of stuff, including beer rum. And there's this one little tiny lady who would come every morning and say how her daughter had and you would hear the innovative excuses she made to just to buy that bottle, that pint of beer rum. Well, we stopped selling beer rum. After a while, we don't sell anything that is not good for you, cigarettes, these energy drinks. And no, if it's not good for you, we're not going to sell it. But not many business people are like that. So there's increased secrecy, there's increased isolation, and then there's changes in the appearance or health of the person. And this, you know, it took some expert knowledge to be able to recognize this. But with time, men who drink and become addicted to alcohol over a long time, their body starts to change. And if you notice in men, their muscles, shoulder muscles will start to get smaller and their muscles will wither away and their breasts will become pointed and they start to look effeminate. Their belly will get rounded because the alcohol affects their testosterone levels and they literally starts to become effeminate. Now, the exact opposite happens with women. After prolonged drinking for a long time, women begin to acquire attributes like men. They start to become flat chested. You'd see veins appearing in the hand and they're becoming very muscular like. And, um, and so that these are things that should raise questions in your mind. Then there are mood swings or unexplained anger. Why? Why that happens? Because when a person, if they drank last night, this morning they will be in withdrawal. A person in withdrawal is very irritable. They're more likely to be angry at the drop of a pin, as we say. And they will have mood swings. 1 minute, if they're under the influence, they're high like a kite and they're very sweet and mellow, very jovial and outgoing. But when it is wearing off, they become introverted and very private and isolated, as I said before. And of course, with time, they will not be able to catch up with their responsibilities. And this goes for men and women. But women in particular who have fixed responsibilities, the children has to be dressed and sent to school. Their lunch has to be packed. In order to pack the lunch, you have to secure the items and so on, the snacks and the fruit and whatever you put in their lunch bags. And then you have to now prepare for the evening when the husband is coming home, and the children, in the meantime, the house has to be kept clean and all the other things, the chores. But if you go and getting drunk and passing out in front of the TV, you would find you can't get up and keep up with these responsibilities. And there's a million and one excuses. And when they can't make excuses, the arguments would ensue. So that is a prescription for problems, the chaos in the household. And of course, frequent doctor visits or prescriptions for anxiety or pain. These are all telltale signs that there might be a deeper underlying problem, because I can tell you, having worked in psychiatry myself, the tablets doesn't remove the problem. If a woman is, for instance, stressed out and depressed because her husband is unfaithful, she taking medication, tablets, anti-anxiolytics, and so on is not going to fix the problem. They have to go into counseling. The husband has to change his behavior. So we have become far too dependent on chemotherapy, tablet for everything. A tablet, we have medicine now from the cradle to the grave, and there's an over-reliance on medication, chemotherapy. Now, think of someone you know. You have noticed some of these signs, but weren't sure what they meant. What do you do? What do you do? This would be, of course, you can call me and we can talk about it. What are some of the barriers to recovery for women? Now, even when women want help, the road isn't easy. because, like I mentioned earlier on, they would be so supportive if the man wanted help. He'll get time off from the job and they'll probably put a little relief and he'll go to union. He has a union to protect him from getting fired. Women are not likely to have those kinds of facilities. And then the big question, who will look after the children? Who will cook for him and get him organized for work? There's nobody willing or able to do that. He can't bring a person overnight in the house. And then there's all that amount of insecurity. You know, she feels that to bring somebody else when she's not there in the house, some maid or something like that, she would probably want to ditch her program when she goes. So there's also in some societies, even here, the fear of losing custody of the children. Because once you get labeled as alcoholic, alcoholism is a mental illness as well. It's recognized as in the DSM-3. So in other societies, you get labeled as an alcoholic. That would be sufficient ground for the health department to come in and children services to come and take your children into foster care. So women are afraid, especially if they are estranged from a husband and there are battles for custody of the children. The fact that you are labeled alcoholic will weigh heavily against you when it comes to making a claim to have the children placed with you. So there's that real fear that exists. Then, as I mentioned, there's lack of childcare. Who will take care of the children? Treatment centers do not provide this kind of accommodation for mothers, to have somebody take care of the children. I am not aware of even in the developed countries where they will be able to take care of the children. So, especially in a society where a lot of people are living in a nuclear family arrangement, there's no grandmother, grandfather, auntie, or uncle, and so on. We are all living in the nuclear family arrangement. Now there's nobody to take care of the children. And if they are young, they're too small to be left alone. Father can't give up the job to stay with them. So this is a real problem. How does she go for help? Now, later on, I will make some suggestions because as we're on that topic, I want to say that there are practitioners like myself, for instance, if I may put a plug here, where a person, whether it's man or woman, can stay home with their family, come for treatment, come for counseling. I also offer acupuncture, which will deal with the withdrawal symptoms so that you can stay at home, you can still keep your job and still be in treatment. But we can speak about that one-on-one. Then there is also the question of financial dependency on partners, sometimes abusive ones. The partner is not willing, after you come home and find you drunk so many times, they sometimes reaches to a point of domestic violence and all of that. Men are not likely to pay. Very few will, if they're in abusive relationship, will want to finance the other person's recovery. And then there's the shame and stigma that make them fear of being judged. And I know a lot of women wouldn't even let their mothers know because they feel that they have disappointed their family so much by turning out to be a drunk, as we say in Trinidad, so that they go down literally into dying without wanting to ever come out and admit that they need help. Now, there are also programs that are not gender sensitive. So that, Cora is an example. I work there and I can tell you. When you have men and women in the same facility, treatment facilities, the issues, women are not likely to want to speak about their issues in front of men. And AA also has had some of that problem in the physical meetings. Now, thank God, there's the online meetings where women don't have to sit in the presence of men to speak. But even then, with men sitting in the rooms, I am sure, I feel pretty certain that women do not feel free to be able to speak about intimate personal issues that impact their substance abuse and recovery. And so I have suggested, and there are one or two groups now that are predominantly women. I know that there's one called Sober Sisters in Trinidad, of a group, a AA group that only has women. And these are some of the facilities that should become more and more available to women in the community. Now, what are some of the pathways to healing that works for women? The good news is that women can and they do recover, especially when treatment is tailored for them. And I am telling you, I do jump in to AA meetings occasionally. There's one called the Circle of Reflection that has meetings every evening. And it is actually being chaired by a woman right now. And there are many, many members, female members who attend that group. And it has become like a family, and I have been referring women in particular, men and women to that group. And anyone listening who would like to get information about that online AA group, you can contact me after the program, and I'll be happy to give you the information. So that, the good news is that women do recover. There are many of them now who are in recovery for years. So that although, the AA will help with the alcoholism, and NA will help with the other drugs and so on, there's still need for counseling, in the one-on-one counseling that deals with the root causes and not just the symptoms. Now, I know AA does have a sponsorship program that attends to some of these, but I know of instances where, even though a lot of people have gone to AA, I'm not faulting AA here, they would have been on other medications, psychotropic drugs. They're going to AA, but they're still using the psychiatric drugs and finding it very difficult to stay sober, because the body does not discriminate between what is legal and what is illegal, what was prescribed by the barman or what was prescribed by the doctor. Sedatives are sedatives across the board. So, and the truth is, if you really want to stay sober, you have to come off all psychotropic drugs, whether they be prescribed or whether they were you bought it in the grocery or in on the rum shop. And there's greater need for women-only spaces for women in recovery. These are safer environments that foster trust. I know from working in well, in centers where I had both men and women. And there would be so many additional unnecessary issues that develop in those settings, because now the men starts forming relationship with the female patients, and the female patients are also competing with each other and flaunting themselves. And in that milieu, they forget about the purpose for which they came to the center. They are so much into now interpersonal relationships rather than, and then the men have a tendency to disrespect the women, because women addicts a lot of times would have had to prostitute themselves out there in order to support their habit, because not having a job and not having an income of their own. And the addicted males, and they know of this, so they talk down to the women, they disrespect them. So that is not very productive when it comes to dealing with women's issues. Now, integrated services combining mental health, addiction treatment, and family support is necessary, because a lot of times women who present with addiction as a problem, sometimes there's what is called comorbidity, sorry. where they have other underlying mental health issues. There might be depression, there might be anxiety, there might be so many other things going on under the scene, and they need those underlying issues need to be also dealt with if the person is going to be able to sustain their recovery. And critical is the whole question of peer support. I know when you go to AA and NA meetings, they, there is, that is the whole reason for going to these support. They are called support groups because, in other words, you're telling the person, the newcomer coming there that, listen, it's not, you're not alone. There are so many of us here. We have had that. We have been there, done that. We have suffered the same consequences. So that, you know, so they feel a sense of, not being isolated anymore. And they get encouragement to remain sober. I once worked with a mother who entered treatment terrified she'd lose her kids. Instead, she found support, healed, and rebuilt her family. Stories like hers show recovery is not just possible, it is powerful. And I have many cases where relatives have, volunteered to take care of the children. In fact, I myself offered that help once to a villager because he and his wife was estranged, and he was trying, this guy was trying to stay sober. I knew he was trying, but he needed to go in an in-house facility because every day he's come and say, well, look, I i I got so fed up I couldn't take care of the kids. They got me so upset, and he went and he drank. And the neighbors would tell me I'm wasting time with him because he goes every day and goes and get drunk. But I realized that he needed additional help. He suffered severe withdrawal, and I offered to assist. And he eventually was successful in remaining sober. All his children are adults now. Um, Now, here's how families and communities can help. I want to touch on a few points here. One is, the first thing is that we need to understand the nature of addiction. We need to be non-judgmental. We need to listen without criticism, you know. And I've often heard it said among women, women are women's greatest enemies because they criticize the dress you wear, they criticize the color lipstick you have. They tend to be so harsh on one another that women are they're more likely to confide in a man than in another woman sometimes because women, generally just said they don't keep secrets. You tell this one and they'll tell the neighbor, and the whole village will know in a little while. So women they have to be out. I know they can be out there for each other. They can. And I know it is easier for women to talk to women about certain issues. So first, we need to not be judgmental. This is a disease, it's not a bad habit. You know, we need to offer help with childcare or transportation so she can attend meetings or therapy. And I'm actually working with a female patient right now, and it was so encouraging. The first night she came to see me that night, her husband took her to a meeting, and I want to compliment him. You know, sometimes men are so impatient and disgusted, that they don't want to they don't want anybody to know their wife has a problem either, because it's like, um, affecting their own personality. And what we need to do is encourage holistic healing. That is therapy, support groups, healthy routines, healthy diet. We need to, and women, it's not difficult for them because they are really most of the time in the kitchen. They go to the grocery. They can buy and supply healthy foods for themselves and their family. And as I say this, one of the greatest legacy parents can give to their children is good eating habits, good lifestyle habits. And there needs to be community, you know, programs that meet women's specific needs. Like I said, now we have online AA meetings. We need to have women specific treatment facilities. We need to have people who are working with these women to understand the nature of the challenges that women in particular face so that they can address those things. We need to have more accessible treatment centers that are safe for women. You know, in a society like Trinidad, listen, we are seeing more and more women drinking. You just have to drive around on Friday evenings, Saturday evenings, and see the women are sitting up almost up to the pavement now, as if it's nobody business, on these high chairs and drinking, girls going out on a line. And the rum companies are targeting women. Look at the advertisements. You know, this is the way to let your hair down. This is because more and more women are entering the world of work. And as a result, the rum companies know that they have money, disposable income. So get them addicted, and we'll expand the market without even going abroad, without having to pay tariffs, if I may say so. And we need to have public education programs that reduce stigma, programs like this, so that people out there could understand, look, it is not her fault. She might have been introduced to drinking by her own husband. You know, a lot of girls, they were not drinking until they got married. But then their mother-in-laws and son will turn around and say, my son was a good boy until he get married to this girl, as though the girl is the problem. They're causing him to go and drink. You know, that's another story. So we need to have, as I say this, I want to thank this radio station, this television station, for giving airtime free of charge. Airtime is very expensive. Try put an ad and you'll see how expensive it is just to put a 2 or 3 minutes ad. They give a whole hour every week since the inception of this radio and television station. They've been giving an hour for this program as a public service free of charge. And I feel so privileged that I could be also able to offer my privileges, my services in such an endeavor. So government also has to have policies that support mothers in recovery instead of punishing them. You know, mothers should not be fired from their job if the drinking is a problem. We need to have more and more employee assistance programs in-house, in government services, in private enterprise, so that women on the job who may have a problem with alcohol or drug addiction and can get help. And as I say this, it is more beneficial to the company because here's a worker who was trained and experienced in the job for many years now, is so skilled, and it is really a waste of resource to have to lose that person. So that I want to say to all you brothers and sisters listening out there, if you know someone, if you have someone you love who is struggling, now here's a message that you can let them know. You can let them know that they are not alone. There are many other people who are struggling with this and they have not given up and they are now turning their lives around and that they are not beyond help. And I want to let you all know that help is available. Yes, there's a shortage of appropriate and adequate services, but in the meantime, help is still available. So that, you know, we have local helplines, we have Alcoholics Anonymous. The office is located on Rivulet Road, and the number there is 495-4803. Sorry, 495-8403. That is 495-8403, and their email is cigaa52@hotmail.com. So they can be reached as Alcoholics Anonymous in Trinidad and Tobago. And there is also the Substance Abuse Prevention and Treatment Center at Coro Hospital, where you can go with a referral or without a referral. If you go on on a Thursday, the clinic is on a Thursday. I used to work there, and you will be seen. And if there's a space, well, as I said earlier on, I'm not sure if they are admitting women there now, but I knew New Life Ministries that is located at Mount St. Benedict. They have a branch now in Santa Flora that is specific for women. And there are other treatment facilities. There's Rebirth House for men. I am not, I Rebirth House in the past used Serenity Place. They can, I suppose, still refer people to Serenity Place, which is a treatment facility for women in particular, and is located in Point 14. Now, I want to let anyone listening out there, if you, man or woman, and you have a problem with alcohol or drugs, there's no shame. Alcoholism and drug addiction is recognized by the World Health Authority, by the Pan American Health Association, by the British Medical Association, indeed by our own health department, Ministry of Health here, recognizes that alcoholism and drug addiction is a disease, just like any other disease. It is now listed in the DSM statistical manual as a disease, and the symptoms are listed there and everything. So that there's no shame. You know, it's just like high blood pressure, just like diabetes. So if you suffer with alcoholism, yes, it might have started off as a out of curiosity. You may have continued to use it recreationally. And as I mentioned earlier on, because of anxiety, depression, and early childhood trauma, a person who might have been introduced to it recreationally start using it to help them to cope, and eventually becomes dependent. And of course, dependence does not stop with time. This is a progressive illness in that it doesn't get better with time. And as I say that, remember I said earlier on, women are not able to metabolize alcohol and drugs as readily as men. So that this is why it is cunning, baffling, and powerful. In that a woman might tell herself, "Oh, look, long time I used to drink a half, and I'll still be able to manage to do my work or drink a nip." But with time, your body develops, at first it develops tolerance, but with time, it can't handle it. It can't metabolize the alcohol. Your liver starts to get compromised, and you are getting drunk now without realizing it. And you're telling yourself, "But I just had 2 drinks. I'm not drunk. I would be able to manage." And then the next thing, you, and of course, when you add another factor, you're getting older, age has its own problems with balance and mobility and all of that. When you add alcohol and other drugs to the mix, it just makes matters worse. So you're falling down drunk when you shouldn't be, you know, and you're passing out on the floor, and people come home and meet you on the floor, sound asleep because you had too much. And this could be very embarrassing, could be very traumatic for young children as well, to come home and see mom in that condition, unkempt and whatever, in a nightie, still in the morning, didn't have a shower. I mean, you all could conjure up some very, very ugly signs in your mind. This is your reality of that situation, and nobody wants to be in that situation. So that I want to say that, addiction is not a moral failure. It's a human struggle, and recovery is a human right. Recovery is a human right. To every woman listening or watching, know this: you are worthy of recovery, and your story is not over. Yes, I know it is not the most comfortable, because the reality of of the society in which we live, the stigma is so imbalanced. Men are not so much stigmatized, although they are. Women are more stigmatized. And if you have a problem or you know someone who have a problem, a woman, please, help is available. You can call me at the numbers on your screen, either 671-3040, 671-3040, or 768-5925, 768-5925. And I must encourage the few women I've been working with lately here this week. They know who they are and they are listening to the program. I want to encourage you to keep on keeping on. Remember, the formula is you avoid that first drink one day at a time. No first drink, no drunk. It is not the last one that gets you drunk. It is the first one. You didn't take the first the first drink, you will not get drunk. So remember, keep your stomach filled, avoid arguments, go to your meetings, and don't get yourself too tired. And join me again next week, Thursday, for another program in this series. I also want to remind you again, this program is being recorded and will be posted on Facebook and YouTube in a few minutes. And it will also be repeated on radio and TV Jagriti at 10 p.m. tonight. If you want any further information, you can reach me at 671-3040. That is 671-3040. And I would be only too happy to help you. So I want to thank all of you for listening and spending time with me this morning. Let's continue to support and uplift and empower women on their journey to healing. So that, again, I want to thank the radio and television station and the staff there for facilitating this program. And until we meet again next week, Thursday, I want to say have a good weekend. I know it's a long weekend. Please, if you know when you take that first drink, you can't predict what will happen, then don't take that first drink. If you do not want to go in a certain direction, don't even look that way. All right. So thank you again. I'm your host, Ron Dwarika, signing off for today.